Hey developers, today we're going to talk about TypeGraphQL. So this is a way to do GraphQL using TypeScript. It's a pretty cool framework that does a lot of things for you. We're also going to take a look at TypeORM, which is an ORM that's based on TypeScript. And we're going to combine the two to create a really cool GraphQL, just a really simple GraphQL server. And I'll show you and walk you through that. Before we get started, let's have a quick word from our sponsor. And today our sponsor is Udemy. Udemy is one of my favorite resources for quick, cheap, easy courses. I put a link in the description below of some of my favorite courses. Actually, I was just going through Nest.js 0 to Hero course, which is pretty neat. I'm also looking at some of course Colt Steele's courses are great. But yeah, just check out the links in the description below. If you click any of those links, you buy anything, I actually do get a few bucks, and I appreciate it. And yep, that's it there. Okay, so TypeGraphQL. So you're probably wondering what this is. So let's take a look at the website. And let me give you a little explanation of what I'm trying to do. So I am in the process of creating a new project. I'm really excited about it. It's called Dev Bootcamp. And it's going to be an interactive website to help people learn more about coding boot camps. And I'm creating the back end on that. And by the way, I put a link in the description where you can find the GitHub for that. It's an open source project. I'm just getting started with it. And I know I want to, instead of doing a normal API backend using REST, I want to use GraphQL just because, I like some of the benefits of GraphQL. I like how it's very easy to understand. It only has one endpoint. I can do these different type of queries to get exactly what I want. And it's a new technology, and I just kind of want to play around with it. So to get GraphQL up and running, I was thinking, what is the best way of doing this? And there's a few tools that seems like most people use, especially if they're using a Node backend, which I am. And that is, I'm going to use a Node Express backend. We're going to use something called TypeGraphQL, but there's some people that use Prisma, which is a way you can kind of replace traditional ORMs, helps auto-generate a lot of things. And there's something called Warthog, which is another one. There's tools. I was looking through Wes Boss's Advanced React course, which, by the way, I also have a link in the description. And he's using Prisma with GraphQL Yoga to create his GraphQL server. But I thought maybe just to start off with, I think TypeGraphQL is really easy and simple to get started, and I'm going to use an Apollo server with it. So when I was looking through the documentation, it makes sense to me. So it has a lot of these decorators, has these object type decorators, which you can use in TypeScript. And that's one thing I wanted to do is keep TypeScript there because with the correct type setup, it makes my job a little easier. And I really like TypeScript. And you could just set up types like this. So this is what the schema definition language is in GraphQL. And this is what we want to look at when we create it inside our app. So I thought this was kind of a cool way of doing it, and we can do it using these decorators. We can set different fields and different creation dates. Also, TypeGraphQL has some other things. It has like authorization guards, which later on, if I ever want to add authorization to my app, I can do it. It has some validation stuff in there that's pretty cool, dependency injection, and more. So yeah, kind of really interested in me, and that seems to be what I've seen a lot of people going. They're either going with Prisma, with like GraphQL Yoga, or they're going with TypeGraphQL with TypeORM. So I decided this would be better for me to start off with. And I checked out the project in GitHub. It's pretty stable. Seems like, let me see here. If I go to the GitHub, if I go to the release notes here, there's a one up at GitHub. And it looks like, it's has lots of stars, 2,000. It has pretty good active development. They have over 34 contributors. It's been going on for a while, and it seems like it's here to stay, which is another thing that I always look for when I try to bring in new projects or frameworks, and I want to make sure that I'm not going to be left stranded in 6 months if the creator decides to leave. So let's take a look at how to get started. Well, first thing, one more thing before we get too far is I mentioned ORM. If you don't know, ORM is a way you can do object relational mapping. So essentially, we're taking objects and we're mapping them to our database. And it just makes a lot more sense when you're creating your database layout. You can just kind of lay it out in like this object format. And you can see here, you could put data, you could put entities in columns. There's an active record style or data mapper style. So you can see here, this is at entity. So we're creating this user and do primary generate column. So we're putting all these different columns. So we're basically defining this table within our code right here, and then we can access it really easily. We can do this repository.find, repository.find1. We can also have this automatically generated when the app starts, which is a nice feature, which I'll show you guys. Which is really great when we're just trying to do real quick, rapid prototyping. We're creating new tables. You can do migrations too, so you can create different migration scripts if you want to create new steps in the process here. And yeah, it just makes it really easy. And by the way, I will give credit where credit's due. Ben Awad had an amazing, really long series where he used TypeGraphQL and TypeORM to create an app. So if you guys are interested, look up Ben's work too on YouTube. He does a great job of this, and that's where I got some inspiration for this project. So I'm definitely not an expert. I'm still trying to learn, but I'll show you how to get started here. And we'll set up a GraphQL server, and we'll use the GraphQL playground to mess around with it. All right, so we're here in our project. So let's begin. You can see here I have nothing in here. So as with every project that you start like this, we'll just go ahead and we're just going to install a few things. And my keyboard is a little clicky, so you'll hear some clicks here, but let's go ahead and start. I'm going to do a yarn. I'm going to add. And so let's add our dependencies first. We'll need the Apollo server Express, of course. And then we're going to install Express. And then GraphQL. And then we're going to use Postgres as our database. So we're going to install Postgres here. And we need this thing called reflect metadata. That's actually part of TypeGraphQL. They recommend you install this. And of course, we're going to install GraphQL, TypeGraphQL itself, and TypeORM. So we'll go ahead and hit enter there, and those will install all of it inside our package here. And actually, we didn't create a package file yet. So let's do that first. Let's do yarn init-y. I'll just create our package.json file, and now we'll go ahead and add all these in here. Okay, so now that we have everything installed here, let's add some dev dependencies. Now these are ones that are going to show up in our package.json under dev dependencies, and they're a way just so that way we can do things while we're working in the development environment. It'll help us with our builds, but it won't be necessarily needed when we deploy the application. So we can do yarn add-d for development. And first we want to add some types in. So I want the express types. These are TypeScript types. It'll make it easier for us to auto-complete things, and things will look well for us. So you'll use the GraphQL one, types node, and a few other things. We'll use nodemon. This will be what we're going to use to restart the server, and it'll also look for any changes. We're going to use tsNode, which is a TypeScript node. It's a way to convert our TypeScript to JavaScript. We're going to use tslint for future, and then TypeScript, of course, and we'll install all those. And then we'll take a look at our package.json. Actually, as it's going here, let's see here. Here's our dev bootcamp. Here's our package.json. Here's our dependencies. You can still see it's installing our dev dependencies. Cool. Here's our dev dependencies, and it went ahead and installed them all. Perfect. And just so we can start things, we'll add a scripts, and inside this scripts, we'll add a start, and we want to start it basically with the nodemon that we were just talking about earlier. So nodemon --exec tsNode. It's going to convert our TypeScript to JavaScript on the fly, and we're going to create a source directory called index.ts. Oops. And I'll go back up here. By the way, people always ask me this. I use Synthwave 84 is the Visual Studio Code. That's what I'm using for this look and feel of this app. You can see here it's under Preferences, Color Themes. Okay, so since we have this in, now we can go ahead and get the source index file. So I'm going to do source index.ts, And let's see if we can just get a basic GraphQL hello world working. One more thing before I get too far, I don't want to forget this file. We need to install a tsconfig.json file, and this will make sure our TypeScript's actually working correctly. So to do that, I'm just going to copy and paste from another screen here, but this will be included in the GitHub. That's in the description below. So this is this essentially says I'm going to use this ESNX async and iterable ES2017. This is needed because we're using TypeGraphQL. We need to have these settings in here. It shows our output directory /dist. These are just common TypeScript, variables. One thing we want to change though, I'm going to allow synthetic default imports. I'm going to set this to true. And then I'm going to add in one more, which I'm going to call, it's called ES module interop. That should be it. And I'm going to put this to true. And this ES module interop and this allow synthetic default imports, it's going to be just a little easier to import some things in like Express and things like that. And I'll show you that in a second. Cool. All right. So we'll see if this all works. If we did not, we might have to fix a few things. So I think we have everything in place. We have our package.json, we have our tsconfig, and now we can go ahead and see if we can create that hello world. So let me look here. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to add this decorator called resolver, and this is a part of the TypeGraphQL. And for some reason, my app wants to import it from DNS, so that's obviously wrong. We don't want to do that. Let's see. Let's try to import it correctly in a second. But it'll be hello resolver here. And now we can actually put in a query. So we can just do query. And we'll do an arrow function, and we're just going to return a string. And then underneath here, we can create an async function. So we're going to async this function. It's going to be called hello world. And once we're in, it's importing the wrong things, but I'll fix that. Hello world, and we'll return hello world, Erik. I don't know. And cool. So let's see here. If we do control dot, let's see if it finds the right resolver for this. So it wants to add it from DNS, so that's obviously wrong. But we can add it from the right place, which we'll just have to do manually here. We'll import resolver here, and we'll do it from TypeGraphQL. Sweet. And then also we want to add in, this actually should be not query document keys, should just be query. And once again, yep, it found it that time. So now it's mentioning right here that unable to resolve signature class decorator when called as expression. But once we get it actually attached to the right place, it should work correctly. But I'll show you how that works. So we're going to go const main. This is our main method. We're going to go ahead and just call it right here. And then inside this main, we're going to create something called schema. And we're going to await, we're going to call build schema. And you can see here, this is a part of, I'm going to audit and import from TypeGraphQL. And it's looking for, if you look right here, it's looking for a few things, but we can add in, let's see here, all this stuff, auth checker. But what we're looking for is resolvers, because that's what we just added. So now we can put in our hello resolver in here. And it should work there. What we're going to do is now create an Apollo server. Okay, and then in the Apollo server here, we're going to call it Apollo server. We're going to do a new Apollo server. I'm going to pass in the schema, which is this right here. And now it says we can't find Apollo server, so let me capitalize it. Can't find it, so I'm just going to import it in. Import. Let me make sure I get it from the right place. Apollo server from Apollo server Express. Easy peasy. And also, we're going to import in Express from Express. That'll help out. And also, I forgot to import one other thing here. We're going to have to import this reflect metadata. And actually, since we did we added that new option inside the tsconfig, we don't actually have to actually put star. We can just do it like this. Cool. So now we have the constant Apollo server here, but it's not being used. So we're going to put app. We're going to create a new Express app. And we're going to use our Apollo server. And we're going to apply middleware. And we're going to pass in the app. And finally, we're going to start this. So we're going to wait. So we just do app.listen. And then we just put in the port number and it has a callback. So we'll just put in on, I don't know, 4000. And we'll just do something like this. Console log started. So let's see if that works. And if we, oops, let's delete that for now. And see if we have any problems. I know this is still complaining that unable to resolve signature of class decorator from a called in an expression, but I think it will work. So let's see here. So I'm just going to npm run start. Okay, give us an error. So I guess we do have a problem with this expression here, which I need to figure out. So we have this class resolver here, and it's of type TypeGraphQL, and inside of it we have a query. Oh, so I have two. That should be like this. And let's try it again. Let's try to run it. See if it runs. So now we have another problem. Oh, one other thing we forgot is the closing brackets like that. Or opening parentheses, that is. So we'll start it. Oh, we got one more error. This is const main async. So it doesn't like my async because I forgot the arrow function. So let's see. I'll run start on this. Let's see if we get any further. Cool. Says started here. So let's take a look to see if it works. It's on 4000. So I believe it's on /GraphQL. Cool. All right. So here is the GraphQL server. And if I look inside the schema here, here's my hello world. So let's just try to change this to hello world. And let's hit play. Cool. So hello world Erik seems to be working. See, I got my data back. Hello world Erik, the resolver seems to be working. Awesome. So let's add in TypeORM real quickly. Now I kind of started right here, but what we want to do, we'll create an entity and we'll call a location.ts file. So these entity folders where I'm going to put all the entities, and this is where I'm going to kind of put exactly what I want the object or the entity inside my Postgres database to look like. So since I'm using TypeORM and TypeGraphQL, I'm going to create a new object type. And in this object type, I'm going to do a new entity. And that's not right. Let's do entity. It's really aggressive there with the autocomplete. Entity. There we go. And then inside the entity, we're going to do a new class. So we'll export class. I'm going to call it location. And then we have to extend the base entity, and that'll give us the options to like find things and do like that on it. So make sure, let's see if I can find it. So it doesn't find the TypeORM stuff that we needed to do. So I'm going to import object type, and actually, excuse me, not object type. I want to do entity, and I'll add it from TypeORM. It'll be TypeORM. And let's see, it has a problem with it. Cannot find TypeORM. Let's try that again. TypeORM. There it is. Great. So now inside, and it can't find base entity. So let's see. Cool. So now I can add it from there. And now I can go ahead and add in a few fields. So I'm going to add in a field. And this field is going to return. Actually, let's just do two things. For an address, we're just do address and location for this. So we're going to just keep it really simple. So I'm not going to have anything there. So this just declares it as a field, and then I put at column here, and I'll have it as a text column. And I can even put in other things in here, like I can put in column comment options. So if I do this, I can put in like if it's nullable or if I need to do some sort of uniqueness. So I'm going to do unique here, and then make it true. So it needs to be unique. And I'll just put the name, address, and I'll put a string. Oops, I'll type, type string. And I'll do another field, and this will be column, and I'll just make it text as well. This time I'm not going to do anything special. I'm just going to be phone, and that's going to be also string. Cool, so now I have this object type. Its location extends the base entity, and that's what it does here. So what I need to do now is I can add a resolver, which ends up, I can add a new query essentially for this. So I already created the one resolver here, but let's create a new folder. I'm going to call it resolvers, and I'll put the first one called location resolve TS. And inside here, this is where I'm going to do our location resolver. So I'm going to just copy and paste first. I just want to make sure this works right. I'm going to take this resolver here, and I'm going to just remove it and add it over here. Oops, to this location resolver. Oops. Let me try that again. There we go. And we're going to do TypeGraphQL here. I'm just going to add this in. And then back into my index file, I'm going to delete these ones we don't need. And for this resolver here, I'm going to hit control. I'm going to have to import it in from our location resolver. So instead of having class here, I'm going to export class. I'm going to call it location resolver. Location resolver. And then inside here, my location that didn't work. Resolver. Cool. So the app crashed, but okay, it started again. Let me make sure it still works. Schema's here. Cool, so we still have it working, but now it's on its own file called resolvers, this one. But just doing a query is pretty boring. Let's see if we can do a resolver to grab the, to actually grab a location. I want to just grab the location information. So we can do that. So I'm going to do another query here. And this one is going to return a type of location, which will make sure that we should grab it from here, this export class location. And this query here will do an async, and this will be a, I don't know, locations. And then this is where we'll need to do things here. So we first need to make sure that this location here is grabbed from somewhere. So we're gonna have to import that in. Well, we'll do that in a second. We'll do return location dot, I think we just do dot find. And this location is not found because it doesn't exist. So we'll import location from, let's see here, dot entity location. There we go. Let me just reformat this. Okay. So it's not showing any errors anymore. And one other thing that I'd like to do here is actually to create the connection to the TypeORM so things, work. So I have this Apollo server here, and what I can do is right before the app listen is do an await, and we're going to use this create. Well, we'll go ahead and just uncomment this out. And this time we'll make this as grab from TypeORM. And I'm going to stop the server here. I'm going to save everything. And we're going to see if what this does. So let's see if we have any errors. I'm going to run start. One other thing that we need to do to get TypeORM to work is, I almost forgot, we need to create a new file. And it's going to be the ormconfig.json file. And I'm going to copy and paste this from another screen. And this essentially just sets up our ORM for us. And what this is saying is I'm using Postgres. Actually, I'm port 33. So I'm using Postgres, going to connect to localhost. So use Postgres as the username and Postgres as the password. It's going to connect to database dev bootcamp, which I've already created. So make sure you do that before you guys start. There's this option called synchronize. So if we go into the TypeORM, which I think they have a description, connection options maybe. Synchronize. Here it is. So you can see here, synchronize indicates if database schema should be auto-created in every application launch. So this is what's going to auto-create the schema during our launch. So we're going to have it auto-create it, and we're also going to add some logging so we see it on the screen when it starts. And then we have to, and inside here we had to set where the entities are. So I put source.entity. So that would be, I'll save this. So source entity. So that's where it grabs the entities. If we had migrations, we would put them in migrations. And if we have subscriptions, we would have them there as well. So I think that's all correct. Let's see if it works. I'm going to go ahead and run npm run or icb yarn start and see what happens here. Okay, so we did get an error. Okay, I'm missing primary column entity location. Okay, so I do need to create a primary column, which I missed. So I'm going to go to this location here, and I can add a primary column. So to do that, you add a field. I believe it's a field, right? Yep, field. And then inside the field, we have this arrow function, and we can just call ID, which we'll add it here in a second. And we'll add primary generated column, and we'll just have a number here. And so this tells it that this is the primary column. It's going to be auto-generated, and then we're going to use the type ID, which we can just grab from GraphQL. So now it added that in there. So we'll save it, and we'll go ahead and start it again, see if it works. And this will just take a second. It's trying to restart the server. Cool. So you can see it did all this work right here where it's saying it's basically creating all the columns for us based on the schema that we created. So it started. So let's take a look back over here and look at our GraphQL playground. I'm just going to reset it. And if I look in schemas, cool. Now I have a new query for location. I have a new location type, and I have a type query. I have a type location. I have something that'll grab all the locations. So let's see if it works. So we can do, let me go and delete this. Now we have a hello world and locations. So if I do locations, I can get address and phone. So if I do that, oh, I just see an empty location because I don't have anything. So what happens if I wanted to add a mutation to this? So good, let's go back to our location resolver. And let's try to add in a mutation for this. And that way we can actually add something to it. So this is a little more tricky, but we can do @mutation. This one right here, @mutation. And then inside @mutation, we need to basically set it up what it's going to send. So we're going to do this arrow function, and I'm going to have the mutation just return back a string that, well, we can have it return back. Well, you know what? We'll have it return back a location. So after you create the location, it'll return back the location. So we'll make another async function. We'll call it create location. And this is where we can use a special thing called @arg. And this is where we can create what arguments you need to pass in to it to create the location. So we can do @arg. We need to create in, to do this correctly, we'll need to pass in two things. So one will be the address, and we'll need to then put in address, and it's type string. But we can also add in more than one. So we'll do a comma here. And on the next one, we'll do @arg, and we'll pass in the phone. So if we go back to our entity here, which is right here, we have the address and phone. We shouldn't have to pass in the ID, of course. So we have, we'll pass in the phone, and we'll do phone, and that'll be type string as well. And we'll just make sure this @arg is in, yep, there it is. Okay. So now since we have those in there, we can actually do something. So we can return, and we're going to do the location. And this is part of, create is a part of something that you do with the TypeORM. So we're going to create a new location, and we're going to pass in the address and phone. And that should be it. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to see if I get any errors here. Cool. So it looks like it did everything for me. So I should be able to do this new mutation. So I'm going to just refresh it. Still, location still works. So you can see schema now. I have a new mutation right here. So create location. So let's see if our one works here. So I'm going to create a mutation, and I'm going to use create location, and I can pass in two arguments. So phone 775-555-1212, and then I'm going to pass in the next argument, which is address, and 123 test, and then I'm going to tell this to return back address and the phone. So I'm going to hit it play here. Cool. So it seemed to have worked. It added it, I think, to the database. So let's see if we go back to our locations. We used to have 0 locations, but now we hit play, and we got an error. It didn't. Oh, you know what I forgot? I created it right here, but I didn't save it. So let me do one more thing here. I got to do save. or it's not going to work. Okay, so let's try that again. Going back to create location, I hit play here. Okay, I think it saved it. Let's go to locations. All right, there it is. So now it returned it. So now we know it's in the database. All right, cool. So yeah, I really like the way TypeScript, TypeGraphQL, and TypeORM works here. It took me a little bit of time to figure the syntax out with all these different decorators to understand them. You can actually even do something more here. You can create your own like type and then include that in here. There's definitely a lot more we can do here, but I think this is a good start. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments below. I had fun creating this. Hope you guys liked watching it. Thanks. Take care.